Hey guys, welcome back again to another episode of Healthy Design. We'll take a little break from our discussion on insulin resistance. Got a question on YouTube from Sarah asking about carb cycling and different hormone issues, different things along those lines. So I thought that would be something good to kind of dive into. Um, so I guess first we need to talk about what is carb cycling because there are tons of different ways to do it. So we need to kind of get a common definition, basically, or at least a context for what we're talking about in this case. Um, for me, the first person I heard about carb cycling through is a bodybuilder, Justin Harris. Actually has a troponin nutrition as well, so some supplements there that are actually pretty good, by the way. Um, and so you can do carb cycling to gain weight, you can do carb cycling to lose weight, and he's a bodybuilding coach as well, so he'll help prepare people for contests, and he'll use carb cycling to get them, contest ready, plus bulk them up in the off season. So there's other way. So the way he does it, or the way I kind of see, there's at least one high day a week and at least one low day a week, and then there may be medium days as well. That varies depending on training schedule. So you tend to have your highest carb day or days because you may have multiple, especially in the off season when you're trying to gain weight. You want those on your hardest workout days. That way, those carbohydrates are going to get used a little bit better to help you recover from your workout. After we exercise, it's easier for our muscle cells to take up glycogen, that glucose floating around, and store it. So that's why you want to try to take advantage of that, especially on those harder workout days. And then, a non-training day would be a low day. Normal training days would be the medium days. Um, like I said, you got all kinds of ways to carb cycle. And so you could keep alternating high, medium, low, high, medium, low. You could do it that way, high, medium, medium, low. There's all kinds of combinations there. And I mean, some of the people do like intermittent fasting where it's an every other day fast. So I mean, that would be a form of carb cycling, calorie cycling too. And so I guess that's one thing to clear up. If we're talking about carb cycling, we're also cycling calories. It's just that main difference in calories is coming from our carb intake that day. Um, so the way I'm doing things currently, I have 5 low days of carbohydrates in a row, and then I have one high day and one medium day. That's what I've found over time has helped me and been beneficial. Basically, well, I guess even before Justin Harris, I guess I should say, the first carb cycling, just never kind of thought of it that way, would be carb night or carb backloading from kefir. So carb night, you just eat 6.5 days of low carbohydrates, have one really high day during the week, and I mean that was very helpful for me, and losing body fat, leaning out, and things. What I would notice a lot is once I started to get to a certain point of leanness, so as that body fat levels went down, I needed another day of carbohydrates in there. Maybe not as high as that carb night, but at least something. And so I added that kind of more midweek. When I tried to gain weight, I'd do more of a carb backloading where I'd have carbs more towards the end of the day, but I'd have those carbs at the end of the day multiple times during the week, somewhere between 3 to 5 times a week, just depending on what I was doing, how much weight I was trying to gain. So those are some of the different ways I've used it in the past. You can again have people that will fast one day, eat normal one day, fast, eat it, so there's all kinds of ways to do it. But primarily what we're going to talk about is where you have like multiple low days, maybe one medium day and one high day. So we'll kind of do it more along with some of the protein sparing modified fast that I'm using now, which is part of Lyle McDonald's rapid fat loss protocol. You could say it's kind of a combination of that and its Ultimate Diet 2.0. So I don't know. It's a mixture of things, but based on what I've seen work well for me in the past, that's why I'm doing the 5 low days and then having those 2 days of higher carbohydrates. So let's give a little background on that protein sparing modified fast. Some of this comes from Lyle's book, and so it is a crash diet. Do we think crash diets are necessarily healthy? No, especially the way most of them are done. So what his point in writing that rapid fat loss book was to figure out and kind of give people the best way to where it has the least negative impact, and that's by increasing protein, making sure you're getting essential fats, having some exercise in there, and basing things off of your category level, so your level of body fat, and also activity levels too. And so that way it makes it as healthy as it can be. So again, the question is, who is this for? This is going to be for people who need to get like on the stage or be at a certain level of leanness at a certain point, and especially if they're running behind schedule and need to get there, then they're going to have to do something extreme like this. The other thing this could be used for is if someone is has a good bit of fat to lose, or they just want to jumpstart their diet with this, and then move into more of a moderate approach, that long and slow approach. So I think everyone would agree the long and slow approach is better. It's just sometimes time doesn't allow you to do that long and slow approach. So that's when this can come in handy to kind of speed things up. For people that do have the time for that long and slow approach but want to start with this, the benefit is you see some rapid fat loss. And so when you see that, it's motivation to keep going, and that can help you continue through that long and slow process. There's nothing magical about this. It is the calorie deficit that's doing it. There's nothing magical about carb cycling when it comes to fat loss either. It means that you're in a calorie deficit, at least for the week. And so I think that's a good point. We get too caught up a lot of times on having that deficit each day and that being the biggest thing, when what really matters is we have that deficit over the week or over this extended time period. While I'm talking about that, let's talk about another little rabbit hole. I think people often conflate fat burning and fat loss. Sitting here right now, I'm burning fat just because there's hardly any energy, so my body's going to get it from fat. It doesn't need to do anything higher than that. And so I'm burning that fat. That's great. But if I'm not in a calorie deficit, that doesn't mean I'm losing fat. It just means I'm burning fat for energy. If I'm eating at maintenance or above, I'm either going to stay the same weight or actually gain some weight. So to truly lose fat, we have to be in that deficit. So don't get those two things conflated. We do want to burn fat, yes, but we have to be in a calorie deficit too. And so, I mean, there are times like when I'm exercising, lifting weights, I'm not just burning fat. I'm sure I'm burning some carbohydrate as well because of the intensity of the exercise. That's what the body does. That's normal. That's a good thing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the categories. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget, and I got it for women this time too. So for men, category 1 is less than 15% body fat. Category 2, 16 to 25%, and then or 24%, and then category 3 is 25% or greater body fat percentage. So for women, category 1 is less than 24%, category 2 is 25 to 34%, and category 3 is 35 or more on body fat percentage. And so then, again, to try to make things as healthy as possible, to maintain lean body mass as much as we can, which also means maintaining muscle mass as best we can, the protein recommendations vary from 0.8 to 2 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. So that's a good bit different than like a pound. So yeah, divide your body weight in pounds by 2.2 to get kilos, and then you can figure things out. And then for fat, he wants you to take 6 grams of omega-3s daily. So the other thing he includes in there, again, so the protein recommendation and diet breaks, refeeds, or free meals, the frequency of those things depend on which category you're in, but then also your activity level. If you're sedentary, active, or extremely active, so the more active you are, the leaner you are, the higher the protein intake. The more body fat you have, the less active you are, the lower the body fat, or lower the protein intake, sorry. And so then same kind of thing when it comes to the refeeds, free meals, diet breaks. The leaner you are, you're going to have no free meals, you're not going to have any of the refeeds, you're just going to do a diet break every 2 weeks according to his plan. Well, every 11 to 12 days. For me, I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm having that refeed kind of, every week. And then after probably 2 weeks of this, I don't know, maybe 3, we'll see. We'll say 2 to 4 weeks, somewhere in that range for sure. Then I'll do a week or 2 week diet break itself. So again, kind of the leaner you are, the more active you are, the more frequent that diet break's going to be. If you're in that middle category, you get to take advantage of free meals and refeeds and then the diet breaks. And then if you're in that third category, you get to take even, you know, more advantage of the refeeds and stuff. So it'll be longer for some of it, but you get to at least have some of that. So again, for those specific details, you need to buy his book. I don't want to give all the details away, but you know, his Rapid Fat Loss and Ultimate Diet 2.0 could be very good and give you a lot of background information on things. All right, so then let's get into hormones a little bit. I'm pretty sure the question is referring more to thyroid hormones, specifically stated, but also sex hormones. So testosterone, estrogen, luteinizing hormone, different things like that. There are other hormones involved. So we have ghrelin that kind of helps to signal hunger. So when it goes up, it makes us really hungry. We want to try to keep that low on a diet because the hungrier we are, the more likely we are to break the diet and eat because we just can't take it anymore. Leptin signals that we're kind of full, so it's related to body fat stores and everything. So as we do start to lose that, we're going to have less leptin, which then could also increase hunger. And so all of these hormones are controlled by the hypothalamus. And we've talked before with like stress, HPA axis, which again can be extended to include thyroid and our sex hormones. So if we get dysfunction in any part of that, it could lead to dysfunction in other places. And diet is a stress. So it's going to put more strain, or it's going to require a little bit more of that system. So what can happen, yes, all these hormones can go down with carb cycling, with a protein sparing modified fast, with any kind of calorie deficit. So I think that's what needs to be clear. There's nothing spectacular or exceptional about carb cycling that leads more to this. You could say the protein sparing modified fast does have more of an effect on these things because of that extreme calorie deficit. You're at a lower level, you don't have the same energy coming in, that's more of a stress on the body, so that's going to lead to some of these changes more quickly, most likely for most people. However, this modified protein sparing modified fast is going to be better than just doing some of the crash diets where they're not keeping protein intake high, they're not keeping weight training in and different things like that. So there's probably this kind of scale that kind of goes up, like this isn't so good, this is better, this is even better than that, this might be the optimal. Again, there's going to be some variation in all of us on what we respond best to and what goes well for us. So this is where those N of 1 experiments come in handy. You need to kind of figure some of this out for yourself because we are all made just a little bit differently. This is where we can use some of the research to help inform our decisions on, okay, I think this sounds reasonable to try, so let me see. And so, I'll kind of test this out. Here's my hypothesis. I assess, this is what I'm going to do, so I'm going to test this out and then reassess what happened. It worked, I'll stick with it. Oh, it didn't work, let me try this. So that's how we have to do things. And then once you try that, you reassess again. Okay, that worked, stick with it. Or that didn't work, let me try here. So you have to just keep doing that over and over and over again, and you'll figure out what works for you. Unfortunately, our bodies do change over time, so what worked in the past may not work now, but at least you know how to go through that process. So one of the things we will see when we're on a diet and we have that calorie deficit is that there is decreased central or sympathetic nervous system activation. And so there's a synergistic kind of effect between that sympathetic nervous system and thyroid hormones. So the greater that sympathetic nervous system's functioning, then it's going to make those thyroid hormones even more effective. If that SNS activity is down, then the activity from the thyroid is going to be down. Those hormones aren't going to work just as well. It's not saying that as soon as we see some decrease in that sympathetic nervous system, we're also seeing a decrease in the thyroid hormones. I'm not seeing that. We can see a decrease in those given enough time with things. This is where things seem to be a little bit trickier for women a lot of times. Some of the research shows that for many women, you can see decreases in a lot of these hormones within 5 days of a fairly significant calorie deficit. So this goes back to why Lyle McDonald includes the free meals, refeeds, diet breaks. There's research to show that having a free meal probably doesn't do a whole lot to affect hormones. Psychologically, I think it can have a big impact because you get to eat some things that you weren't allowed to eat, and so that can be nice. Same thing with the refeeds. You're getting to eat some foods you haven't eaten. It can be, a couple of days. And so now we're starting to see where that can actually have a physiological impact on those hormone levels. And then the diet breaks a week or two where you're eating at maintenance. That definitely has an impact on those hormone levels, bringing them up. So we can see a decrease in things as soon as 5 days. Seems like 2 days or more may be enough to help bump those levels back up and help make things a little bit easier. Um, One of the things too, women seem to be the most variable in all of this, so don't take this as a fact that all women after 5 days are noticing these changes. Some will, some won't. Maybe there's gonna be variation in that time frame. Another thing they found, so in the past we thought that once women got to a certain body fat percentage, that's when they lost their menstrual cycle. Well, again, there was a lot of variation in that. So we can't necessarily say it's correlated with any certain body fat percentage. Obviously, the lower it is, the more likely that is to occur, but that doesn't really tell us anything. So again, some research showed that for women, they don't tend to have any issues with their menstrual cycle until they get under 30 calories per kilogram of lean body mass. So I did the numbers. I won't bore you with all of it, but for most women, say like 150 pounds, 30% body fat, basically that means once they get under like 1200, 1300, I'd play with some different numbers. So basically between 1200 to 1500 calories a day, that's when you start to notice things. And so this is why we see where it can be, I don't want to say harder, but it can definitely be trickier for women to lose body fat than men, because most women aren't eating a whole lot more than that already. And so if that's what they need to be at for, even just maintaining, so let's take it back from worrying about menstrual cycle dysfunction, just for, let's say that's what they're eating to maintain their current body weight. If we cut them down 500 calories, that's a huge amount. They're down to 700, if they were at the 1500, at least they're at 1000 then, but still that's very low. That 700 calories, that's not too far off from the protein sparing modified fast. So that's why we can see that. But like for me, getting that 30, that means I'm at 2400 calories. I can cut 500 from that, no problem, and still have plenty of space. So it just makes it easier. And so that's where body size plays a big role in things. It can make a big difference. So again, we can see that menstrual cycle dysfunction once we get under that 30 calories. That does not mean that every single woman, once she gets under 30 calories per kilogram of lean body mass, she's going to experience that. It's just saying we don't see it above that level, we only see it below that level. Where below is going to depend on the person. And again, women tend to vary more than most men in this. Not that men have menstrual cycle dysfunction, not saying that. Just saying, we can definitely have issues with hormones too, testosterone. And so that can be a problem, but where it impacts people is going to vary. There's just less variation in men than there is in women. So let's talk about REDS, relative energy deficiency syndrome. This can go along with a lot of this because you see some of these hormonal changes and different things. And so I like the term relative energy deficiency, because you can have issues even if you're eating a lot of food, but if you're also having a large output, it still may not be enough to meet those demands and what your body has to normally do. And so I think that's where some of the issues can come in, or why people get really scared, because a lot of times when people crash diet, that's not the only thing they do. Okay, they've probably been pretty sedentary, but then they've got some kind of social event they got to get ready for, and they don't have much time. So they're going to crash diet. So they're going to cut their calories really low, 400, 500 calories a day. They're going to start exercising. So they're going to start doing weights, and then they're going to start doing cardio, and they're going to do 2 hours a day and different things. They've added so much stuff in that's going to lead to problems. That's going to be a huge hit to their system from a stress standpoint. They're not going to be able to meet those energy demands at all. And so then that's going to be much more likely to lead to these downstream effects on hormones, and then probably have a whole huge increase in ghrelin because the body's like, I do not know what's going on, let's get some food in. And so I think that's part of the thing to understand with this too. A lot of this is just the adaptation the body's doing, The body wants to survive. It's not trying to work against you. It's just not too concerned if you're 15% body fat if you're a woman, or 5% body fat if you're a guy. Even though you may want to be, it may not want you to be, because it may be smarter than you and realize that's not actually what's best for you. So we get caught up thinking our body's working against us when really it's just trying to survive, and it's going to prioritize short-term survival, not long-term too. And so short-term, we really don't need to have all these sex hormones going, because we're not worried about getting pregnant or reproducing or anything like that in those moments. So, so my overall thoughts, some of it with the crash diet or the way people do things, and I mentioned in another video, I think the fat loss update, about some of the weight loss clinics, and I see this with functional medicine too. Too often people kind of prey on fears or insecurities in people, and so using the weight loss, oh well, it's going to tear up your hormones, blah blah blah. Any calorie deficit can do that, especially given long enough. So yeah, that's not a good thing, but there's ways we can mitigate that risk. So it's not, this, they just kind of overemphasize or over exaggerate that importance sometimes. And then on the functional medicine side is using health issues to kind of scare people and get, I just don't like that. I don't agree with that. That's why I say and try to kind of reinforce all the time that this is our body's adaptation to things. Granted, it may not be adapting in the way that we want, but based on the information that's been given, that's what it's doing. Again, goes back to cell danger response, how we're going to have different insults occur to us during the day. Then hopefully as we sleep at night, we go through the healing cycle, and then we're right back to where we started from and can keep doing that. Now, granted, if we don't heal properly, we could get stuck in either CDR1, CDR2, CDR3 before we get back to normal. But if we're stuck in those, there's a reason our body's stuck there. We need to do something to help get it out of that, and then we can complete that healing cycle. And so when, again, it's not good that our body's stuck in those things, but our body is adaptable. It can learn how to get out of it. Sometimes we need to get out of the way, and the more we stress about it, the more we're probably going to cause it to stay stuck there. And so again, kind of that test, come up with a hypothesis, test it out, reassess, and keep repeating that. That's what you can do there. So if you're stuck in something, my advice, come up with a plan. Follow the plan for a time period. Assess the results. Did it work? If it did, stay the course. If it didn't, change things up. And then just know I'm following the plan, doing the best I can. That's all I'm focusing on. We don't have control over the outcome, but we have control over whether we follow that plan or not. So sorry, that was a little tangent, but that does bug me. I don't want to prey on people, and I don't like it when people do that as well. So my overall thoughts with carb cycling, protein sparing, modified fast, it's not for everyone. Carb cycling is very adaptable too. You can use it to eat in excess, you can use it to eat in a deficit, so it can be used to gain weight, lose weight, or maintain weight. Protein sparing modified fast, it is not as adaptable. It is definitely just for a deficit and for weight loss and hopefully fat loss. We don't want just weight loss. I've touched on that many times. But the other thing with it, it is only short term. It's not something that's meant to be done week after week after week, month after month after month. One of my overall thoughts on things too, I think too often when fat loss slows down, people conclude that their metabolism's shutting down, that there's these hormonal issues that are going on, and that's why. And that's not the case. That's just the way this works. You can't maintain the same rate of fat loss as at the beginning. You don't even have the same amount of fat to lose. So, if you were still, let's say you lost 5 pounds of fat doing the protein sparing modified fast, just a nice round number, but you had 50 pounds to lose. Okay, well, that was 10%. But once you lost that, or now you're at 45 pounds of fat, if you lose 10%, you're at 4.5%. So you still are having the same rate. It's at 10%, but it's less. So, that's an extreme example. You're probably not going to lose 10% all the time and keep that up consistently. But it gets the point across. There should be some adaptation. There should be some slowing down. if you weigh less, your body has to use less energy. It doesn't need the same amount as when you weigh more. It doesn't take as much energy to move me at 180 pounds as it does to move me when I'm 210 pounds. I'm not saying this huge difference, but it is a difference. Um, and some of this too, it's again, the body's adaptable. The body's going to adapt. If it doesn't have the energy coming in, it's going to find ways to conserve things to help us survive. It doesn't know like, oh, well, this is just for a short time because they're just trying to get to this point and then everything's fine. The body can't think like that. Although our brain does, for us to come up with these ideas, it's not the way our body sees things and does things. Um, so a lot of the slowdown that we see, that's just normal. Part of it's because of the weight we've already lost doesn't require as much energy, and that's why we have to make other cuts. Sometimes too, people think they're stuck and things aren't working when they just haven't given it long enough. I've talked before about that whoosh effect, where it just seems like I know I'm eating in a deficit, but I'm not seeing any changes. This can really happen to women who have more issues with water retention based on their hormones. And so, sometimes you might feel like you're stuck, but you give it a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden, overnight, 3 to 5 pounds gone. So that water retention is masking some of the fat loss that has occurred, because obviously you didn't lose 3 pounds or 5 pounds of fat in one day. You didn't lose that much, lean body mass, muscle mass either. The only thing it can be is water. So sometimes we just need to be patient and go with that. The other thing we always forget, we underestimate our body fat percentage. You do it, I do it, everybody does it. We all think we're leaner than we are, which means, we think we have less body fat we need to lose than what we actually need to lose. And so then we think it's going to be this relatively short time period, but we're already wrong. So, we can do the math. I think the math helps, the 3,500 calories for a pound of fat. Granted, things don't always work out that way, but it gives the general idea across. So, that's a good starting point for things, but just understand that's not the way it works in the real world. So it's good to have that as kind of a theoretical underpinning, but don't take that for, the gospel or anything like that. So we think we have less fat than we do, so it should be a lot quicker to lose it. So then when you add in that we actually have more than we thought and it takes longer to lose it than we thought, it's kind of this double whammy that just makes things take a whole lot longer than we expect. The other thing that can be a big problem is we underestimate our food intake. So if you're not weighing things, tracking things, or have a long history of weighing and tracking things, you're probably off. You may think you're in a deficit, and you may be, but it may be a lot less than what you thought. For women, again, this can be really tricky because they can't have those huge deficits as we talked about because they don't normally have the calories to work with. A couple hundred calories here, that can mean the difference between being in a deficit and being at maintenance, or maybe even slightly above maintenance. And so, one way to think about this too, how many times do you measure out a true tablespoon of peanut butter or almond butter? Normally you're just getting a tablespoon, putting it on there, and it's heaping over. So that could be hundreds of calories, especially if you do multiple of those a day. So that's where some of these things come into place, to where people think they're in a deficit, but they're actually not. And then the long and slow approach is best. It's going to be the best way to do things. There's times where the protein sparing modified fast or rapid fat loss protocol can come into play. There's times where it's not going to be made for everybody. Some of the diet breaks, I do think, and the refeeds, that can help mitigate some of these issues with decreased hormones. And so, the slower we can go, maybe adding in some of these refeeds and diet breaks, we can prolong our diet, and so prolong the time before we experience any of these issues on the hormonal side. So basically, we experience those as late as possible rather than as soon as possible. I know Eric Helms has mentioned that he'll do something similar with his contestants, like female contestants getting ready for bodybuilding shows, figure competitions or whatever. And it might be the 5-2, so 5 days of low calories, 2 days of higher calories, or it could be 4 days low, 3 days high. It kind of depends. But what he's seeing is that women are maintaining their menstrual cycle for a lot longer. Um, one other thing I do have, or one other thought I have on this, and I'll close up here, is that we forget too that when we lose weight, you know, within a reasonable amount, not trying to get to extreme levels of leanness, we might actually improve our hormones. We can improve our insulin sensitivity, which then can mean we're not aromatizing as much testosterone to estrogen, so that can improve our testosterone levels for both men and women. You know, women obviously don't need as much as men, but they do need some, and that can be very helpful in a lot of ways too. And so, you know, if we're over fat for what our body needs, if we get that into the range where our body needs it, we're actually going to be healthier. And so, you know, those levels are going to actually be better off rather than worse off. Now, the leaner we try to get and the more we try to get, you know, to that side of things and under body fat, you know, for what our body needs, the more likely we are to experience those issues. And so that's why, again, I think people believe, like, you know, bodybuilders, you know, physique competitors, that they're staying at these levels year round. I do think Instagram kind of makes it seem that way, but they're not, or if they are, they're not functioning very well. We can't stay at those levels. So, you know, I'm trying to get pretty lean right now. Plan on doing that for a while. I haven't noticed any issues with sleep, any issues with libido, anything along those lines. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. There probably will come a point, either I will stop before I get to that point, probably just before, or I'm going to experience some of those things and then I'll stop. And so when I do come off of this fat loss plan, then I'm going to gain some of the weight back. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to purposely gain some of the weight back. I'm not going to try to stay at whatever percent I get to. Let's say it's 5 to 7. I'm not going to try to stay there forever. Probably get back up definitely somewhere between 9 to 12%, and hopefully try to stay more in that range rather than going much above that this time around. Just to see how that goes. You know, I mean, last time I do think I went probably more 15, maybe even above, but I do feel like it helped me to gain some more muscle mass than what I have in the past. I've definitely done the thing before where you cut, you know, you bulk up and you cut down and you're the exact same body weight. Well, that wasn't effective. Luckily, I haven't done that in many years, but this year I do feel like I bulked up and gained more body fat than normal for me, but I also felt like it led to a lot more muscle mass too. And so far, doing the fat loss this way has been really well, and this has been one of the easier fat loss phases. I'm not saying it's been easy, but it's been one of the easier ones. So, sorry, that was a whole bunch of rambling, but I wanted to give all that background and give some context for answering this question. For women after menopause, you know, again, losing some of the body fat, that also again could improve insulin sensitivity, help out on some of the different hormone levels and things too. So again, I think people want to try to scare people sometimes with, like, oh, if you go on a diet, you're going to have all these terrible things happen, your body's going to shut down. And that's not the case. Your body's going to adapt to it. You know, it's going to learn to live off those lower calories. That's why we have to make changes as we go on. But that's why we don't want to start with that extreme deficit plus adding in all the activity and everything else, because then we have nowhere to go. So, you know, in the case, if you're starting off with the protein sparing modified fast, kind of jumpstart fat loss, I would just do that and keep activity level the same, do it for a short time period, then move into that long and slow approach. And then there you can gradually increase some activity levels, gradually decrease, you know, the calories and different things too. So, all right, guys, I hope this answers that question fairly thoroughly. I hope I gave enough context and nuance about it too, so it could apply to a lot of different people in a lot of different situations. And so if you guys have questions, please leave them in the comments. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy answering things, and I'll see you next time. Bye.